What if you could wish me away? And what if you spoke those words today? I wonder if you'd miss me when I'm gone. It's come to this, release me. I'll leave before the dawn. But for tonight, I'll stay here with you. Yes, for tonight, I'll lay here with you. But when the sun hits your eyes through your window, there'll be nothing you can do. And what if you could hear this song? And what if I felt like I belong? I might not be leaving, oh, so soon. Began the night believing I loved you in the moonlight. So for tonight, I'll stay here with you.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. In this unit, we're going to be focusing on slips and trips in the workplace, hazards that result in slips and trips, and how we can prevent slips and trips in the workplace. But I want to start out the unit, though, by discussing inspections and audits. Inspecting, auditing, that's a big part of what we do as safety and environmental managers. During this unit, I'm going to have you do a slip trip inspection in your living area, at home, around campus, wherever. But we're going to be doing some inspecting practice focused on slips and trips. So I need to talk about inspections and audits to start out the unit. This is a topic that should be covered, maybe not in every class, but probably half of the classes that you have in safety and environmental management should have some discussion of inspections and audits, because it is such a big part of what we do. Just like training is a big part of what we do. There should be some discussion or some activities focused on the training dimension of the profession in every class. This is probably, for sure, you should have covered elements of what I'm going to be talking about in safety administration and programs, SAFM 3403. But if not, here it is, your introduction to inspections and audits. You've probably heard me talk about the 5 E's and a P of safety. This is a very much simplified view of safety management. There are 6 different things that we really need to focus on. 5 of those things start with E. Get my cursor over here. 5 of those things that we focus on in safety start with E. We have education, evaluation, enforcement, engineering, and encouragement. And the 6th element that I think is important is the planning part of our operations. we plan for safety. Without planning, it's going to be difficult to have safe operations. So again, I call these the 5 E's and the P's of safety. Again, it's a gross oversimplification of what we do, but in a nutshell, these are the things that are important. Educating our employees, evaluating our operations. Evaluating our operations is what we're talking about with inspections and audits. Enforcement, making corrective actions when we do find deficiencies in the workplace. And enforcement sounds kind of heavy-handed. That doesn't mean we're a cop, and I'm going to talk about that as we move through this video and the next video. But again, it starts with an E, so it works. Engineering, we're always looking for engineering controls. The engineering part of this is injury prevention or hazard prevention, hazard mitigation, risk mitigation. Engineering refers to prevention efforts that we help implement in our workplaces. Encouragement, that refers to building relationships with the workers, encouraging them. Don't beat them down. Don't make them hate you. Build trust with them. Build relationships with you. Encourage them. Again, that encouragement, that refers to the human element of what we do. And then finally, the P for planning. Planning ahead. And we could do, we've done some of that when we talked about hazard analysis earlier in the semester. We talked about risk assessment. That's part of the planning process. I would like to see us, and I don't think it will happen, but I would like to see us have an entire class just on operations planning, because it is such an important part of so it's so important for us to achieve our goals. We need to have good planning, and there are so many different elements of the planning process that could be considered. There would be more than enough for an entire class. But again, here we're focusing on inspections and audits, which kind of goes along with evaluation and enforcement, these two particular dimensions of safety management. We will be talking about the Schubert cycle or the PDCA cycle in this unit, and how inspections and audits relate to this management cycle. I don't want to say a lot about it right now, but in short, we have plan, do, check, act are different stages in the PDCA cycle. The check stage involves the evaluation, the monitoring of operations. We're checking our operations to see where improvements need to take place. What we're getting into with this video and the next video are really some basics of safety management. You probably don't need to look at this, but I do provide you with a link here to the OSHA website that gives you a very fundamental examination of safety management processes. Again, very basic. It's a starting point. What I like about this link, there are links to several other resources that you might be able to use in your career. So you might just want to jot down this URL, put it away for safekeeping, or just always remember the OSHA website as a great resource that you will go back to time and time again in your career. And you can't avoid it. There's a lot of good materials out there, a lot of good resources, a lot of important tips. But this link here applies specifically to safety management processes. Now, the companies that you go to work for will probably already have a system in place, and they may not really need to start at the very beginning. But even those companies that already have a system in place, as a safety manager within that system, you might be able to benefit from some of the information that you can find by following this link. But now let's get into inspections and audits. Both inspections and audits are reviews of a company's safety operations and risk management practices. Many safety people, and I ran into this time and time again, many safety people, and I'm not using the term professional here, many safety people use the terms interchangeably. I think a well-trained, well-educated safety professional will know that there are differences. They are not the same process. Most safety professionals, including myself, we're going to distinguish between these two processes. They have similar objectives, An inspection audit, there are similarities, but there are important differences. An inspection, and I'll do this again when we focus more closely on inspections in the next video, but inspections is monitoring operations, monitoring the immediate operation that's taking place, looking for unsafe conditions and unsafe behavior, and making sure that you are in compliance with the regulatory requirements. That's an inspection. Looking at the workers, what are they doing? Looking at the conditions in the workplace. Are they safe? If they're not, we make note of that, and we implement corrective actions, or we recommend corrective actions. Again, it's more boots on the ground, even though auditing is boots on the ground also. When I say boots on the ground, I mean you're actually out there on the construction site, on the factory floor, in the hospital. If you're working as a safety professional in the medical industry, which some of you might, you're out there where the work is taking place during an inspection. An audit, on the other hand, is more of a review of the safety management system and the different safety management processes. And it's often, and I would say it's best, when it's conducted by a third party from outside your company, from outside your organization. And I'll talk more about this as we move along. And we're going to take a closer look at audits in this video. Then in the next video, we'll take a closer look at inspections and the inspection process. Now, you can talk about different levels of auditing. At the very top of the list would be a comprehensive audit that looks at everything. But you can focus in on different aspects of your company's operation. You can conduct a management systems audit, just focusing just on the management processes. You can focus on performance. In a performance audit, you're going to be looking at things like injury rates and how injury rates have changed over time. How well is your company performing from a safety standpoint? Are you having a lot of injuries? Is your injury rate declining? Is your injury rate increasing? Those types of things. Then you could have more of a compliance audit. And I don't mean compliance with the OSHA regs. I'm talking about compliance with accepted management practices, which kind of goes along with the management systems audit. But in a compliance audit, you might pull out your company's safety policies and compare those companies' safety policies to what's accepted as a best practice safety policy, to see if your policy is in compliance with what other companies are doing, with what is considered a best practice. We're not, again, with an audit, we're not out on the factory floor looking at worker behavior. It's more of an inspection of management processes and the effectiveness of those processes. Now, a comprehensive audit, to go back to that particular point, it's going to include all of these different elements: the management systems, the performance, the compliance. It's going to include all of this. A comprehensive audit of a company's safety management system could be a week-long process. And if you have third-party auditors come in, it could be a team of 3 or 4 auditors that come in and they just dig through your entire operation to better understand how you're doing things and if what you're doing is working. Very valuable. And I'm going to talk more about third-party audits before I'm done here. Again, an audit is a review of safety management system components and operations. Here are some of the questions that we might address or would be addressed by our audit. Is the operations planning process functioning as it should? We're going to look at the safety planning process or operations planning process. Is it working as it should? Is the company's emergency action plan in compliance with what is required for an emergency action plan? Does it function properly? Does the company have written policies as required by OSHA or another agency? There are certain requirements of OSHA that a company has a written policy. For example, OSHA requires written policies for fall protection. OSHA requires certain training for fall protection. And it doesn't have to be OSHA, it could be another agency. Also in the audit, you could look at how the company, or how your company, or if you're the third party, you're looking at how the company responds when there is a problem, when there's a deficiency. Does the company provide effective training for their workers, which is a big OSHA requirement? And again, it's common sense safety to a degree. If a worker doesn't know what is safe, they haven't been taught what is safe, how can we expect them to work safely? We have to show them in training. And normally training programs are going to be repetitive in nature. There's going to be refreshers periodically. We just came off the fall protection unit, or a couple of units back. We talked about fall protection. Some of you may still be working on that unit, which is fine. But fall protection is one of those topics that you have to have continual training. You do, when a new worker is hired, you put them through an extensive fall protection training program, and then once a year, you give them additional refresher training on fall protection. Does the company involve personnel from all levels within the organization? That's another important part of our management system. Our management system should have involvement from all levels within the organization. Generally speaking, again, this is very general here, are the company's safety management efforts effective? Is what they're doing. Does it work? Doesn't work, maybe need to do something else. How are we gonna know whether it's working? Well, we're gonna look at metrics, performance metrics, and I'll talk more about that as we move along. Another way of thinking about what an audit is looking at, we can look at ISO 45001. Take a little bit of a sidetrack here into ISO 45001 and tell you what that is. ISO 45001 is the new world standard for safety management systems. Best companies in the world, this is what they're doing. It's only been around since 2018. There were several years of development that took place before it was introduced. Now, ISO, let me mention this. I don't want to go into it too far because you should be covering this in other classes. ISO is an organization, international organization for standardization. ISO is an organization that publishes guidelines for how different management practices should be implemented and executed. There's an ISO for environmental management. There's ISO for risk management. ISO 45001 is for safety management processes. Now, 45001 is very closely aligned with OSAS 18001. OSAS 18001 was the previous world standard for safety management. But ISO 45001 has replaced OSAS 18001 as the world standard. Again, best of the best companies will be ISO certified. Companies can be certified, and when they're certified, they're showing that they are following the ISO management practices. Now, this is not a requirement for companies. It's not an OSHA thing. It's not any kind of legal requirement, but it is good for business. If you're an American company and you want to work with companies in Europe, well, you might have to be ISO certified before those companies in Europe are going to work with you. There's a lot of that goes on. There are a lot of companies that will only work with other organizations that have met the same ISO management standards. But let's take a closer look at what's included in the ISO standard. And this will give you a better idea of what you would be looking for in an audit. This is the 45001 table of contents. We have scope, normative references, terms and definitions, context of the organization, leadership and worker participation is examined. Planning is a big deal. Support for safety management systems, for the support from executives within the company is important. Operations, operational planning and control, performance evaluation, and improvement. But let's get even more specific. And I know I'm rushing through this because I don't want this to be an ISO 45001 video. I'm showing you this to give you a better idea of the types of things that you would look at during a formal safety audit. You're going to look at the written safety program, and these are key elements of ISO 45001. This is summarized. I'm summarizing the entire document for you. Does the company have a written safety program? Is it a good written safety program? Is it compliant? Does it have the elements that it needs to have? Well-defined chain of command and organizational chart. Within the organization, does everyone know their job and know who and where to report to? That's important from a management standpoint. Does top management take responsibility for safety performance? Is there operational planning processes in place? Do they use work plans? Do they use hazard analyses? Do they do any kind of risk assessment process? Which goes along with the next point here that you would look for in your auditing process if you're auditing and assessing the company's management system. Do they have a process in place to identify hazards and to conduct risk assessments? Are they doing that? Is it a good process? Can it be improved? Does the company have policies and processes that describe or provide guidelines for what should be done when change occurs within the organization? Management of change is a big deal within the safety management world. According to ISO 45001, companies need to have elements within their process that accounts for the unexpected. What is the process when something unexpected happens? There's also an emphasis, and this is what the better companies should be doing when it comes to controlling hazards. There's an emphasis on controlling hazards with higher order controls, like we talked about earlier in the semester. These are the higher order controls that companies should be working to implement within their operations. It's not always possible, like I've said before, but we should try to eliminate. If we can't eliminate, maybe there's some kind of substitution we can do. And then if we can't substitute, engineering. Engineering, again, is developing a system that takes the worker out of the process. Engineering controls make the workplace safe for even the most unsafe worker. Lockout, tagout is part of the engineering process. Developing machinery with different types of safety devices that make it impossible for the worker to be injured, and so on. A lot of what we've talked about this semester. Are all departments within the organization involved in the safety program? Do you have input from all levels of personnel? Important in ISO 45001, important in safety management, something an auditor should be looking for. Even the person that's the very lowest person in the organizational chart should have the opportunity to provide input. Do they emphasize continual improvement, which we're going to talk more about here in just a second? Are we evaluating performance continually and then taking steps to improve that performance? Is there a regular management review? And is there proof that the management is acting on those reviews? Top management has to be involved. Is there a recognition of barriers that can prevent optimal safety performance? A lot of this sounds like no-brainer common sense, but there are companies out there that are operating by the seat of their pants. They're not planning. They're not considering barriers, and I've got tons of stories that would bear this out. When I was working with smaller companies. Now, Kiewit, my last company, they had all this stuff squared away. But my first two companies, it was a battle trying to get the proper management systems in place. Some other elements that should be considered when we're auditing a company's safety management system. Again, this is coming from ISO 45001. We should examine their performance data. Are they performing a quantitative analysis of performance in data? Are they looking at what we call lagging indicators, such as injury rates? Are they examining leading indicators? When we go in, if we're a third party, we go in, we should expect to see data for companies' training records, number of safety management contacts each day, each week, injury rates. Companies need to be performing these types of in-house analyses. A trend analysis, looking at performance over a longer period of time, is also an important example or an important type of quantitative analysis that companies should be performing. They should have an effective system for storage and retrieval of records. Communication within the company should be effective. It should be easy for anyone in the company to voice their concerns or voice any recommendations, which kind of goes back to employee involvement. But there needs to be the medium in place for communication to take place. Which again, it sounds like obvious, but there are companies out there where management treats everything as a secret. Management doesn't share information that they really should be sharing with workers. Also, management, talking about upper management, VP level, and so on, they don't want to hear criticisms from employees, or they don't want to receive recommendations from employees. But that's not a well-managed company if that's the case. Companies should also be in compliance. Should also be in compliance with any regulatory agencies that have governance over their operations. Could be the EPA, could be OSHA. There needs to be that compliance that takes place. The company needs to be performing internal and third-party audits. We're talking about auditing now. That's an important element for ISO 45001. Again, I mentioned that companies could be certified under ISO 45001. For a company to be certified, they have to prove that they're doing these things. They're going to be audited during their application process, and during that audit, they have to be able to show that they are meeting all of these requirements, that all of these key elements are in place. And I'm going to speed up a little bit. Should be covering this in other classes. If not, I would recommend maybe a workshop on ISO 45001, because it's a major big deal within modern safety management, again, since 2018. Companies should have procedures for investigating loss incidents. As an auditor, we're going to look at, does a company investigate accidents? Do they investigate other types of losses, including near-miss incidents? A near miss is where something unexpected happens. It could have been really serious, but we got lucky and nobody got hurt. So a lot of companies, because nobody got hurt, because there wasn't any property damage, they ignore it and move on. But those need to be investigated as well, because the only thing that kept that incident from becoming a serious injury or fatality was luck. Worker was standing in the right place at the wrong time. Well, what if that worker had been standing in the wrong place at the wrong time and they were crushed by the crane boom that fell? We go from having a near miss where the worker is not standing under the boom to a fatality where the worker was standing under the boom when it fell. So and again, I'm being very specific with my example here. If we have a crane boom that collapses or falls on a construction site, it needs to be investigated. Even if nobody was hurt, we need to investigate and learn why that happened, how we can prevent it in the future. We need an effective safety training program. We also should conduct assessments of the training effectiveness. Companies need to have emergency management planning in place. As an auditor, I'm going to look at their emergency management plans, their emergency action plans. and I'm going to probably want to see several different plans. What is a plan if an earthquake occurs? What is a plan if a tornado occurs? What is our plan if a fire occurs in one of our facilities? We need to have emergency planning in place for each of those different types of incidents that could possibly occur. Back to this emergency, a big one. Wish it wasn't this way, but every company needs a plan for how they're going to respond to a third-party shooter coming into their facility. Happens over and over and over again. Disgruntled employee comes into the workplace and starts shooting. Well, company needs a plan. And they also, I'm getting away from, I'm going further than I wanted to go in this video, but companies that have these plans, they also need to have drills. They need to have a third-party shooter drill. They need to do a mock third-party shooter recreation and go through the steps that need to be followed when that occurs. Locking down the facility, contacting the authorities, and so on. All of the different elements of that emergency management plan or that third-party shooter plan need to be practiced. If you don't practice it, nobody's probably going to know what to do when it actually happens. Again, these were all key elements of ISO 45001, which give us a pretty good idea of what we should be looking at in an audit. But let's look more generally at the elements of an audit. We're going to review documentation. Does company documentation compare favorably to accepted standards? Training documentation would be a more specific example of documentation review. Documentation of incident investigations would also be a more specific example of documentation review. We're going to review performance metrics, such as the lost time incident rate or the total recordable case incident rate. And these acronyms here, these are the widely accepted acronyms that go with each of these different performance measures. We're going to also look at data from the insurance company. We're going to look at insurance loss runs. That's going to give us another measure of our performance levels. Near misses. We're going to examine the near miss rate. How many near misses are we having? Equipment incident rate. Maybe no one was hurt, but there was a forklift that ran into a shelf. We need to investigate that type of incident, and we, as an auditor, should consider those types of equipment incidents and the rates of those equipment incidents in our auditing process. Employee turnover. Now you're thinking, well, what's that got to do with safety? Well, it can have a lot to do with safety. A high rate of employee turnover could be because safety management is not good within the organization. That could be running employees off. Employees are scared to work there. Or employee turnover could be because employees are getting injured and quitting. Or the high employee turnover rate could, maybe employees are quitting for other reasons, not safety related. But if you have a high employee turnover, you're going to constantly have a stream of unprepared green employees coming through your facility, coming through your operations. Those green, unprepared, just starting to be trained employees, they're more likely to be injured. And past research bears that out. New employees are more likely to be injured than older, more experienced employees. So employee turnover. And there are others as well, other measures that you might want to examine, but these are just examples of a few. Now for me, I'm going to look at all of these. These are going to be my top performance metrics when I'm auditing the company. We're going to also conduct interviews with the people at all levels. I'm going to go out on the factory floor and talk to the forklift operator about the company's safety program. I'm going to ask them, well, when was the last time you had a refresher for how to run the forklift safely? When was the last time you had fall protection training? When do you have any recommendations for how the safety management system could work better? Now, the way I'm wording this may not be the way I would word it with an employee, But I want to get their input on how processes could be improved. I want to get their opinion on how efficient they think the process is. The employee, even at the very lowest level, can provide insight that management may completely be unaware of. Management can overlook so much because they're not out on the floor every day. They're not boots on the ground doing the job or involved in that process every day. So I think it's, in many ways, it's more important to get perspective from the boots on the ground guys and women than it is for management. But I'm going to talk to management also. I'm going to ask management about what they think of the process efficiency. I'm going to ask them what they think could be improved or needs to be improved. I'm also going to make sure that during this process, it's going to be a little bit of a test to see if they really understand the company's safety processes. And you're going to see that in a lot of small companies. Small company have a great, beautiful safety program on paper, but it's not been communicated to the employees. So when you talk to the employees about the program, they're not going to know what you're talking about. They're not going to understand the safety process. And for a safety system to be effective, everybody's got to be involved. Everybody's got to buy in. Everybody's got to be involved. Let's talk about the steps in the auditing process. If you're the auditor, you need to do a lot of preparation in advance. You need to have a strategy in mind. And we could do a whole unit on this, but I'm just giving you an outline here. Need a strategy. When are you going to arrive? Who's going to be your contact person? Need to have all that planned out in advance. You need the paperwork and documents that you're going to be using for the audit. During the audit, there will be documents. There will be when I say documents, it could be a digital document. It may be all stored on your computer, or it could be paper documents. It's probably going to be a little bit of both. You want to have a timeline for completing the audit and when the different steps in the audit are going to be completed. Actually conducting the audit, boots on the ground, would be the next step. Document and report your findings. Your findings are going to include deficiencies, also what the company's doing well, and your recommendations. You're also going to develop a corrective action plan or a CAP or a CAP for your company, or if you're doing this for another company, for whatever company you're doing the audit for. You're going to have that corrective action plan, which will consist of those recommendations, but it will be more precise, with some more specific guidance on what they should do to correct the deficiencies. You're going to present and report. You're going to present your report of the deficiencies and your corrective action plan to executives at the executive level. Hopefully, when you get to this point, it may be out of your hands. You may not have the power to get it implemented, but the next step would be implementation. Then once the new plan is implemented, you need to continually monitor its effectiveness. Improvement is a continual process. Good companies place a lot of emphasis on always getting better. Good companies realize that there's always room for improvement, that you never really get to the point of perfection. Always room for improvement. And this goes back to a very simple strategy or process that's been talked about in management circles for going on 50 years now. The PDCA cycle, or the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, in a simple process to achieve continual improvement in an organization. It applies to safety management, applies to supply chain management, applies to management in general. And I'm not going to go into this in any great detail, but there are 4 steps in the process. The planning. Once you have a plan, you implement the plan, you execute the plan. Once the plan is being executed, you monitor, you check it to make sure that everything's working as it should. If something's going wrong, you take action to correct whatever's going wrong. So plan, do, check, act. It's a continuous cycle, and it's a never-ending cycle for companies that take quality serious and take efficiency serious. You never stop planning, doing, checking, and acting throughout this process. This idea all goes back to an older idea called total quality management. Walter Stewart, W. Edwards Deming were the management experts that were kind of behind plan, do, check, act, and total quality management. I don't want to say kind of behind. That sounds wishy-washy. They were the experts that really were responsible for the whole total quality management movement and plan, do, check, act process. What else can I say? This particular concept comes up in a lot of certification exams, so you will see it again. But more importantly, it's a way of becoming better as an organization. That's why we strive for continual improvement, not because of a certification exam, but because we want to be better. And when we're better in safety, that means people aren't getting hurt. That's our end game. That's our final objective. Nobody gets hurt. I've mentioned this throughout our discussion so far, but third-party auditors is an important consideration. When we talk about third-party auditors, we're talking about auditors from outside the company coming into a different company to evaluate the safety management processes. We did this at Kiewit. Once a year, we would have auditors from another company come in and take a look at our management systems. This is a best practice, having third-party auditors come in. It's a best practice that is going to be implemented by the companies that are really proactive, the better companies out there. Now, less proactive companies are going to be reluctant to do this. They're going to be reluctant to spend the money for another company to come in and tell them what they're doing wrong. They don't want to know what they're doing wrong. They're afraid if they bring in outsiders, those outsiders are going to say, hey, you need to do this, 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 and this, and they don't want to do this, 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 and this. Yeah, they are better. They are more comfortable living in ignorance and not knowing how they could be better. And this is a lot of smaller companies out there, and maybe even some of the larger companies. Let's just describe them as the less proactive companies when it comes to safety. They really don't want to know what's wrong, because once they know what's wrong, then they have the responsibility to fix it. And a third-party auditor, they're going to come in there and tell you how you can do better. A lot of these companies that aren't proactive, they've made the mistake of already thinking that they are great. Pride goeth before a fall. That's what happens with a lot of these companies. They think they have everything under control, and before you know it, they have a worker killed in the factory. They have a worker get run over by a forklift. They have a worker that is struck by a falling object and killed or seriously injured. So anyhow, I don't want to get too far off on that, but I'm sure you get my point here. It is a best practice to have third-party auditors come in. There are advantages. The third-party auditor provides a fresh perspective, a new set of eyes, something that maybe management within the company missed. When you see something day after day after day, you might get a little bit complacent. When you see the process day after day, you may get complacent. That new set of eyes is maybe going to catch something that you had missed because you were in a rut. You were in a routine. You weren't looking as closely as maybe you should have, or you weren't looking at it from the angle that you should have been looking at it from. That new set of eyes is very valuable. Another advantage of having third-party auditors come in is insurance savings. One of the biggest expenses for a company is the cost of insurance. Have that third-party auditor come in, have the documentation that occurred. You can submit that to your insurance company, and many times they will issue a credit. A credit is, in simple terms, a discount or a savings on the cost of insurance. It's viewed favorably by OSHA. It's viewed as proactive by OSHA. So if your company receives an OSHA citation and you have documentation showing that you're using third-party auditors, that you're taking safety seriously, that might result in a reduced penalty. It may even result in OSHA dropping the citation altogether. It's going to be viewed favorably by OSHA, EPA, other agencies out there if you're serious about it and you're bringing in third-party auditors. And most importantly, the reason for a third-party auditor, it can make our management systems more effective. No company out there is perfect. Companies need to realize this. They need to bring in this new set of eyes to help them identify where they can be better. It's going to make us more effective. It's going to make us more efficient. It's going to make us more safe. Again, we're focusing on the safety side of things. Third-party auditors can make us more safe and can, in the long run, reduce injuries, reduce fatalities. All right, in the next video, we'll talk more about inspections. Again, we've been talking about audits. Now we want to shift gears slightly and look at inspections in the next video.